New Zealand council rates are out of control. According to the Taxpayers Union rates dashboard for 2026, there are 4 councils who think that above 10% rate rises are acceptable. They are Clutha District Council on 20.54%, Gore District Council on 11%, Waipapa District Council on 10.7%, and Waitaki District Council on 17%. Now, a few people in the comments on my last video said I should look at Waitaki, so let's look at Waitaki. The council had originally discussed a 40% increase and then decided on a 22% increase, before replacing this with a 17% rate increase. So let's see how this generous 17% rate rise is going down with the community.
Council has requested changes to the original 22%. These changes are still to be embedded into the plan, but will bring the increase to approximately 17%.
Listen to your people!
Oh dear, who'd have thought? Ratepayers actually seem a little bit angry about getting absolutely demolished again by above inflation rate rises. But perhaps this above inflation rate rise is a one-off. Let's look. In 2025, Waitaki Council raised their rate by 9.79%. And I just have to read this from the council's own 2025 plan. The long-term plan also sets out a 6.51% rate rise for 2026-27. And then just a few months later, they were discussing a 40% rate rise, settling on 17%. Great planning, Waitaki Council. In 2024, rates were raised 13.73%. In 2023, rates were raised 7.95%. In 2022, rates were raised 7.53%. And in 2021, rates were raised 7.69%. So let's just come up with a feasible round figure to show how bad these compounding rate rises are. Let's say that a person in Waitaki was paying $3,000 in rates at the start of 2021. So $3,000 plus 7.69% plus 7.53% plus 7.95% plus 13.73% plus 9.79% plus 17% would make this person's new rates bill $5,478. Now that is 82.6% higher council rates now than it was in the first few months or start of 2021. So now let's imagine someone on a fixed income like a pension, say. From April 2026, the pension for someone who is single and living alone is $555.15 per week, and that's after tax if this pension is their main or only source of income. In the start of 2021, the pension for someone who was single and living alone was $423.83 per week, and that's after tax if this pension is their main or only source of income. So a single pensioner now gets 30% more pension than at the start of 2021, but they have to fork out 82.6% in higher council rates. Now, how is this going to be possible with the cost of everything else rising too? It is simply not sustainable, and the council should have never thought that these rate rises were acceptable. People are going to lose their homes because of this. And there's going to be so many people, both old and young, employed and unemployed, who are going to be struggling with these constant rate rises. Obviously, the councils give us the same spiel that their costs have gone up and their debts are too high. And I do have to admit that some of the new councillors are not guilty of the sins of past councillors, but absolutely neither are the ratepayers. And even with all the criticism that the Waitaki Council has been getting, you do have to wonder if they truly understand their priorities when you look at the annual plan 2026-2027 pre-engagement council website. If you click on some of the work that they have deferred, you get this. Some projects have been deferred to keep rates low in prior and current annual plan or long-term plans. That means the work still needs to get done, but can be put off until a later date. For instance, in 2025-26, the Mayor and Council has deferred replacing the Oamaru Airport runway for 2 years, so that the $2.8+ million cost would not be put on the rates for that year. The runway can be preserved a little longer and paid for later. However, It meant that the airport could no longer be used for drag racing. Deferred work is work that still needs to get done. It certainly does have to get done. I mean, that poor pensioner eating the beans and not putting the heating on must be absolutely livid that there is no drag racing this year. So let's have a look at the latest Waitaki Council annual report, which is for 2024-2025. It says Waitaki has 14,032 rateable properties, and the total rates revenue for 2025 was $46.722 million. So let's look at how much council personnel are costing. In this video, I'm only going to focus on personnel costs for core council workers, which came in at $19.332 million in 2025. Although you can see that for all personnel costs, including external council-controlled organisations, the costs were $36.406 million, but that is for another day. So the total rates revenue for 2025 was $46.722 million, but $19.332 million was spent on core council personnel costs. So $19.332 million divided by $46.722 million times 100 to get a percentage equals 41.38%. So 41.38% of total rates revenue goes on council personnel costs only. Now, does that not seem a little bit high? I don't know. So let's compare this with a few other councils. According to the Local Government Size Index's Rankings 2025, Manawatu should be comparable size-wise to Waitaki. So according to their 2024-2025 annual report, they have 14,931 rateable properties, which is a few more than the 14,032 Waitaki has. The total rates revenue was $51.124 million compared to Waitaki's $46.722 million. Yet Manawatu's council-only personnel cost were $15.095 million, and compare that to Waitaki's $19.332 million. And if we do the same calculation as before, we can see that in Manawatu, 29.5% of total rates revenue goes on council personnel costs compared to Waitaki's 41.38%. So it's a bigger council, yet it has lower personnel costs. But maybe that's a one-off, so let's go up the list a little bit more and see a larger council and compare their council personnel costs. Let's look at Southland District Council. They have 21,127 rateable properties, which is a lot more than the 14,032 Waitaki has. The total rates revenue is $71.652 million, and compare that to Waitaki's $46.722 million. Now, Southland's council-only personnel costs were $19.759 million, and you compare that to Waitaki's $19.332 million, something doesn't seem to add up here. And if we do the same calculation as before, it shows that 27% of total rates revenue goes on council personnel costs. And once again, compare this number to Waitaki's 41.38% number. So Southland is a much bigger council, but it has almost exactly the same council personnel costs. And now let's go the other way. Let's look at the other culprit raising rates too high, which is Clutha with their 20% rates rise. Now this is a smaller council according to this list. They have 11,371 rateable properties, or as they call it, rating units, which is less than the 14,032 Waitaki has. The total rates revenue is $34.703 million, so much less than Waitaki's $46.722 million, which makes sense because there are less rateable units. Now, their council-only personnel costs were $13.794 million, and compare this to Waitaki's $19.332 million. If we do the same calculation as before, we see that 39.7% of total rates revenue goes on council personnel costs, which is not far off Waitaki's 41.38%. So it's not much better, but it is still better. But Clutha is not exactly a model council, is it, with their 20% rates rise? So I wonder why Waitaki and Clutha councils did not look at cutting council personnel costs, before whacking massive price hikes on long-suffering ratepayers. Here is Waitaki's employee staffing levels and remuneration from their 2024-2025 annual report. You can see that there are 8 council employees on between $180,000 a year and $379,999 per year. And look at what the CEO is on. Wow. Now let's see how this pay structure compares to Clutha. Unfortunately, it has different salary bands, which makes it a little bit harder to compare. But you can see for Waitaki between $140,000 per year and $379,999 per year, there are 24 employees, whereas Clutha Council has 9 employees on between $140,000 per year and $339,999 per year. Now that's a lot more council workers on higher wages in Waitaki. So now let's look at Manawatu, which we've already found out is a larger council than Waitaki. They have 20 council employees on over $140,000, and that's compared to the 24 Waitaki has. So Waitaki has more higher paid staff than a bigger council. And now let's look at Southland, whose council is a lot bigger than Waitaki's council. So they have 21 council employees on over $140,000 per year, compared to the 24 that Waitaki has, and Southland is a much larger council. So how does Waitaki Council justify this? Why do they think that giving ratepayers a 17% rate rise is more fair than taking a pay cut themselves or cutting their staff numbers? Now, a council member on over $300,000 per year could take a 2/3 pay cut and still be on $100,000. But no, that is not even considered. Instead, the council decided to pass the buck to the ratepayers, the people who can least afford it and who are often on fixed incomes. So where is the accountability in this council? Why do the people who have no control over the council's finances have to pay for the council's mistakes? Why don't the councillors who do have control over the council's finances have to pay for their own mistakes? Now, I don't know about you guys, but I am sort of getting let them eat cake vibes from the Waitaki Council. Things look even worse when you pull up the 2018-2019 annual report. Back then, which was only just before COVID, council-only personnel costs were $12.325 million, whereas now this value is $19.332 million. And look how many council employees there were back then and how much they were paid. Can you spot the difference? Something is not right here, is it? They need to do the right thing and scrap this 17% rate rise and come up with a totally other plan, a fairer plan. And I actually think that that will be in Waitaki Council's best interest, because right now central government has created a thing called the Head Start Pathway. Now its goal is to reorganise and amalgamate existing councils so that they join forces and find better ways to work together under one consolidated council structure. Now the government says that this will reduce duplication, improve decision making and create more efficient and capable councils. If done correctly, this should put a stop to the continuous, excessive, above inflation rate rises that are absolutely crushing ratepayers. And right now, local councils are getting to choose which other councils they want on their team and who they want to work with or who they don't want to work with. And if councils can't achieve this reorganisation on their own, then the government is going to step in and make the decisions for them. They will decide who joins forces with who. Obviously, if councils join together, then they will have to cut numbers of staff drastically. A council with less staff now might be more appealing to another council. Hint, hint, Waitaki Council. This is definitely going to be an interesting couple of years watching these councils reorganise. They'll be fighting over who's going to be in control. And can you just imagine the egos battling with one another over who's going to retain power? Now, for councils and councillors who are genuinely trying to do the right thing by the public, which there is a lot of, this whole process should run very smoothly, or as smoothly as it possibly can. But for some other councils who, for whatever reason, have shown that they may not always have the ratepayers' best interest at heart, by, I don't know, let's say putting rates up to levels that can never be justified no matter how much spin you put on it, then this whole process might not go according to plan. Apparently a few of the councils around the Waitaki area have already chosen partners, so I wonder why Waitaki Council is not being picked yet. Who knows, perhaps the other councils don't want that wage bill. So yes, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers for that.